prepared enough. Okay. People thought that I would be prepared enough to go to Carolina with my family, which is in the Mpumalanga Highveld, and our task was to start a new congregation for the Lutheran Church there. There hasn't been a Lutheran congregation before, and so how do you start a congregation? So you go to a fast food restaurant, and we met a person there who had some contacts to some Lutherans and so on, and this is how we started. And then we met in some houses later in the school, and so this is how we started a new congregation, which was, I don't know if it was clever or not, but to send a young missionary who was not that fluent in isiZulu to a township was not that best move, I think, but it was okay. And so we worked there for about 2.5 years before we moved to Nelspruit, which is the capital city for Mpumalanga. And there in Nelspruit, I think it was in 2004, I got to know George Sneyman and the Hands at Work organization. In 2010, early 2010, we had to leave and we moved to Germany, close to Hamburg, a little town called Winsen. And here we are living, and I'm working as a pastor for a fairly large congregation. I've got another 3 colleagues with me. And I married the second time, and we have 3 grown-up boys. One is still with us, the others are in the south of Germany. And I tend to say that I am an African by heart, but I do have a German passport, and with it, many, many privileges. One being that I live and work where I am, being in Germany. And that comes also, living in the Northern Hemisphere, precisely in Germany, makes me to belong to the group of the rich people of this world. And I believe the same is valid for you as well in the UK. And I believe this comes with a huge responsibility. Living in the North, living in the EU or in UK, comes with a huge responsibility if it comes to the richness and the distribution of richness in our world. Maybe we can switch off the microphones on the various screens so that we have only one microphone open, which is mine, so that we don't have too many interferences. But when we have possibilities for speaking together, then of course you have to switch on your microphone again. How much did you spend on your last grocery shopping? Please write your answer into, do we have the chat box available now? No, I don't think so, no? Okay, maybe switch on your microphone and just shout into the room. How much did you spend on your last grocery shopping?
Still spent £141 for 5 people.
Okay.
£67
for 3 people.
for 3 people with Newsom spent, yeah.
Yeah, 62 for us.
Okay.
2.
There's
Okay.
a point to what I wrote in the chat box that I actually didn't know. I just gave my credit card, so it actually sent. Does give a message.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here we have some answers in the chat box, and now imagine if you keep your food in a refrigerator, your clothes in a closet, and if you have a bed to sleep in and a roof over your head, I believe we all have that, you are richer than 75% of the world's population. If you keep your food in a refrigerator, your clothes in a closet, and if you have a bed to sleep in and a roof over your head, we belong to the richer part of this world's population. Imagine now, you have only $1 or £1 or €1 to live on a day. If you are 5 in a family, then maybe you have $3 or $4 a day. What would you buy out of your things you have bought the last time. You only have $1 or $5 available, and your grocery shopping bag was quite full. Now you have to leave quite a lot of things, and maybe you just keep the bread, or maybe the sugar, or maybe the flour. Maybe next week you have to come back with another dollar, and then you can buy something else. I think it's quite interesting to just to ponder a little bit about that. What would I buy for $1 a day? And if I would be responsible for a family and I only have $1 a day, or maybe $2, I cannot buy much with that. What would I buy? And if you only have $1 a day, maybe this would be your dining room. Just some mud on the walls, and then a little fire, an old used cooking pot, and just a little bowl where you can put in some food. Maybe you had something in your garden. Maybe you harvested something in the fields along the road. You don't have proper chairs. There's just some sponge where you can sit on maybe. And that's it. And this is the reality in which we live in our world. We belong to the greener part of this world. If you have the gross domestic product from 2019, you can see that the United States or America and Europe and then Australia and Japan and South Korea, we belong to those greener places. Africa is quite red. So that means the darker it is, the less income is available for the people. So that means we belong to the rich people of this world. Even if we would say we are not rich because we don't have this and we can't afford this and so on and so on and so on. Because we live in this greener parts, we are belonging to the rich nations. We are considered to be rich compared to those who have nothing or more or less nothing. I want to share with you a story from Eswatini. Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. We do have a care point there, Msengeni B, and we also have 3 other care points we support in Chigodolo, Mozambique, and one in Kawaza in Malawi, and one in Kambova in Congo. And in 2018, I was leading a group to visit our care point in Msengeni, and this is the care point, how it looks like at the moment, which is neatly built, and they have used the rocks they found there on the property, and which is a very good picture for how to deal with poverty. You just use what you have. And here you see next to me Baba Vusi Mabuza. He is taking care of those who are working there. Very fine gentleman and a very deep follower of Christ, and it's an honor to know him and to work together with him. Wonderful. So we went and have done our holy home visits, and we came to this homestead where this hut has been burnt down. The situation is like this: there was a veld fire, and this veld fire, which is especially in the dry season, that because of the strong winds, the fire just runs through the veld, through the area, through the bush, and then it burns everything down. And if the wind is in a bad mood, then maybe your hut becomes a victim of this veld fire. And the veld fire came during the night, and in this bigger hut, the kids were sleeping, the grandchildren, and the grandparents were just able to get the kids out of that burning hut, and they survived, but they lost everything they had, which was in that hut. Now the grandparents and the 4 kids all sleep in one small hut together. And grandparents in Swaziland or in Eswatini, they don't get much money. The pension fund, the pension money they get is coming irregularly, and it is very little. Let me say, if we say 30 euros per month, this is what they got. Now you've got 30 days a month approximately, that would mean €1 or $1, £1 per day. And now you have 6 people living on that. €30 a month. And it's not only for food, but also for clothing. It's also for transportation and medical bills, whatever. And this shows you that this can be quite tricky, because if everything is destroyed, what you had, how do you rebuild? The grandfather was selling wood, and that helps from time to time to get some extra income, but many others are selling wood as well. So the price is not that high. So now imagine yourself being as one of the visitors in my group, coming to that homestead and being confronted with the situation. The question is then, how do you feel about it? Maybe we can share a little bit about that. What would be your immediate feeling, your immediate reaction? If you come to this homestead, you get to know the situation, and you sit together with them on that dry ground there, and they share that they have lost everything in this fire, and they don't know what to do. So what would be your reaction? Maybe 1, 2, 3 people can share what their immediate reaction would be.
I think mine would be a huge desire to kind of try and fix it for them. I don't know, that's not necessarily the right approach, but that's my first thinking, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Anyone else?
Mine would be to try to find out what was available and where.
Mine will be helplessness, wanting to help, but just wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah.
Mine would be to try and discover what resources there were within the community. Were the people that you were with unusual, or were they typical?
Markus, ich sage das mal eben auf Deutsch.
Ja.
Weil das Wort beschämt fällt mir jetzt nicht so ein konkretes Wort für beschämt.
Okay.
Vielleicht kannst du dieses eine Wort, dann versuche ich auf Englisch weiterzureden.
Yeah, she would feel ashamed.
Yeah, so because I see their problems, and then I think about our problems in Germany, and our problems here are so ridiculous. So I would feel ashamed.
Okay, and now imagine you would be a long-term volunteer, staying there in Sengeni for 3 months. And you would visit this family time and again. And knowing that they have nothing, or more or less nothing, and you are just a volunteer, also not having that much to live on, how would you react? What would you do in this situation? It becomes tricky now, because when you just pop in and visit the people there and say a prayer maybe for comfort and so on and so on, and then after an hour or so, you will leave them behind, and then, of course, you are touched by the situation, but you are gone. Now, as a volunteer, you come back. As a care worker, you come back. As a coordinator, you come back again and again. They know your number. They know where you are, and they come and talk to you. So what would be your reaction if you would be one of those volunteers? If you don't have an answer, it's fine.
I would want to ask the question, how can I help?
I would want to stay in touch, to like with Brother Vusi, to find out how things are going, and to let them know that they hadn't been forgotten, and also to be a voice for them among people around me in my community who know nothing about that.
Yeah, mine would be similar to that. I would want to talk to my church about what we can do as a church to help, sponsoring children, whatever we could do as a church, and take that story back to them.
So we would build
If I-
kind of a connection between them and those back home, and we would invest into a relationship with this family, which is very good, and I think definitely also helpful, because we will see later, poverty is not just a financial issue. There was anyone else wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I was a 3-month volunteer, I presume we're talking now about hands. I wouldn't want to do anything on my own. I would want to work with the community, build relationship with the community through the, as we have there, the regional support teams and service centres, and build up and empower and equip the community to be able to identify the real needs of that family and work together to sort them out.
Okay. We could discuss much longer, but I still have quite a lot to mention here, so I need to hurry up a little bit. Let me share with you, I think our westernized approach is, and it was mentioned earlier, that we need to do something to change the misery. We always need to do something. Yeah? We are do-it-yourself people, and we need to do something to change the situation. If there's a crisis, we are called to support financially to alleviate the crisis situation, be it via social media or via TV or whatever. If there's a crisis, be it in India or in East Africa or wherever it be, there comes a call for support, and then of course we need to do something so that the situation will become better. And then we donate some money, and we hope that everything will be fine. And often the misery is then out of our mind, and we are at peace because we have donated some money, isn't it? Usually we give some money so that we feel at peace again with the situation, because we have given something. But what we have given hasn't changed the situation at all. The situation for the people affected usually hasn't changed much just because we donated 20 pounds or so. Just put yourself into the shoes of the gogo and the grandparent who has lost everything and all the belongings in the fire. Nothing has changed for them because we have donated 20 pounds. The crisis situation is still there. And if we donate today £100 to the situation in India, and then the misery still would continue. So, but for us, something has changed, because we can say to ourselves, well, I have given something. I have done something so that the misery will be changed. And so what do we give is usually more helpful to us than to the other people in the first place. Of course, when the money reaches, then it does have an effect. And then we argue, if we realize that, well, nothing has changed, then we argue, well, we can't save the whole world. We only can help this and then, and so on and so on. We can't do much. And then we say we are sorry, and we add a very sorry smiley. But is that kind of approach acceptable for those who call themselves Christ followers? Are we as Christ followers off the hook if we donate some funds for the good cause and engage ourselves in some worthy projects? Are we done then? For me, that sounds more like charity. You give something and you continue with your life. Nothing changed in your life. You just give something of your money because you can spare the money for that situation, and then you continue with your life as if nothing has happened. Change is usually not the result of charity. It's nice to have, and those people who receive the funding, it's fine for them, but there is no deeper change. A step into the right direction can be seen in one approach that has been circulated over the years again and again. You might know this saying, give a man a fish to feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish to feed him for a lifetime. The person who has created this saying, I think he was quite clever, or she. But the problem is, if the system is not in such a way that the person can fish because there is no fish anymore, then it becomes very difficult for them. Even he or she might have all the necessary resources for that, for fishing for a lifetime. But we can see, like in Western Africa, that due to the contracts between the EU and West African countries like Senegal and others, those fishermen are no longer able to fish in their own sea because the EU with the big trawlers are taking all the fish away. So it's nice to teach them fishing, but because the system, the global situation is in such a mess that for them fishing is not giving them any support. So there we can see that teaching them to fish is quite nice, but if the system or in the grander situation is in such a bad situation that they can't fish anymore, that they can't survive on what they used to do, if they can't survive from what they do, from what they work for, then we have a major problem. So we tend to think that poverty only is in regard to financial terms. So if someone is poor, then of course he hasn't got any money. But poverty is much more. Deep poverty, alleviation, and justice demands much more than just giving a few pounds or euros. We must think much more holistically, as it is very complex. There's a book out there, When Helping Hurts, by Steve Corbett and Brian Fickard. And somewhere in the beginning, they quote, "Poverty is the result of relationships that do not work, that are not just, that are not for life, that are not harmonious or enjoyable. Poverty is the absence of shalom in all its meaning." Interestingly, the first thing he says is poverty is the result of relationships that do not work. So poverty is not just an issue of finances, but it is a matter of relationships that do not work anymore. So you will get a copy of this presentation at the end. I think David will send it around, and then you don't need to write everything down. It makes it easier like that. Now I want to take you into a journey through our Bible. And well, for me in Germany, the German Bible is quite thick. I don't know about the English Bible, but so we have to do a little bit of rushing up here. So first, some scholars say that nothing in the Bible is as often mentioned as the care for the poor, the widows, the orphans, and the refugees. I don't know if you know about that, but these four, the poor, the widows, the orphans, and the refugees, are mentioned, I don't know, several hundred times. I just want to take a few sentences out of the Bible here and there. We start with Genesis, with the first book. And you may have read that Abraham and Sarah, they were fleeing from their home country because of drought and hunger. They were refugees. The same is valid for Jacob and his sons. And if you go through the Bible, you find it in many places that they were always refugees. And if we consider this and think about the way the EU and also the UK is dealing with refugees, this is not good. But that's another evening topic. If we come to the second book in the Bible, the book of Exodus, you remember that the people of Israel were in slavery in Egypt, and then Moses helped them to get out of that country together with God's help. And they reached then the desert and en route to the promised land. And there they received, in chapter 20, they received the 10 commandments and many other commandments after that. But in the 10 commandments, on the issue of the Sabbath day, it says, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns." It is remarkable that in the 10 commandments, the issue of the foreigners and refugees is the same thing here, that this issue is taken up in the Ten Commandments. In the next chapter, 22, it says, "Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt." Remember where you come from. You were foreigners as well. Then, next verse, "Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with a sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless." This is God speaking. If you oppress the foreigners, if you take advantage of the widow or the fatherless, God's anger will be aroused. This is very, very strong talk. It continues like that throughout the Bible. Deuteronomy chapter 10. God defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners. For you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. Fear the Lord your God and serve him. It's quite striking that in this book, Deuteronomy, this issue comes up again and again and again and again. At the end of every 3 years, bring all the tithes of that year's produce and store it in your towns, so that the Levites, who have no allotment or inheritance of their own, and the foreigners, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns may come and eat and be satisfied, and so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. So if you do this correctly, if you take care of the foreigners, the fatherless, and the widows, then the Lord will bless you. If you don't do that, God will not bless you. One can read it. Chapter 15. However, there need be no poor people among you. For in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess as your inheritance, he will richly bless you, if only you fully obey the Lord your God and are careful to follow all these commands I'm giving to you today. There is no need to have poor people, because the land that God has given us provides enough food for everybody. But the problem is greed and wrong distribution. So if God has given us enough to live on, it's a matter of us not distributing it properly. You may know that already now in May, I think, was the so-called World Overshoot Day, that we have used all the resources for this year already in the month of May. And so we are misusing our planet. We are using much too much from the Earth's resources. And so we would need another 2 worlds, another 2 Earths to provide for all that we are using and needing. At the end of Deuteronomy chapter 27 comes somehow the conclusion. Before it was always said, if you do this, then you will be blessed. Now it says, cursed is anyone who withholds justice from the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow. I think this is the strongest sentence. Cursed is anyone who withholds justice from the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow. So God is very, very strict and very clear if it comes to the care for those, for foreigners, fatherless, and widows. If we go into the book of Psalms, there's a very prominent verse in Psalm 68. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in his holy dwelling. God is the father to the fatherless and a defender of the widows. Psalm 140, I know that the Lord secures justice for the poor and upholds the cause of the needy, the Lord himself. And close to the end of the book of Psalms, he upholds the cause of the oppressed and gives food to the hungry. The Lord sets prisoners free. The Lord gives sight to the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous. The Lord watches over the foreigner and sustains the fatherless and the widow, but he frustrates the way of the wicked. What we read here in verse 7 of Psalm 146, verse 7 and 8, Jesus brings that up also, and we come to that later now. And one of my favorite verses in Proverbs 31, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Speak up means, in other terms, in other words, be an advocate. Be an advocate for those who have no voice. Be an advocate for those who are stranded somewhere. Be an advocate for those who have no means to defend themselves. And as a church, we are called to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. This is a very clear command. And I know that many Christians say, no, as a church, we just need to preach and comfort the people, and social activism is not our task as a church. Well, this verse speaks in a different language. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So if we come then to Isaiah, just one verse from his word, right in the beginning, wash and make yourselves clean. Take your evil deeds out of my sight. Stop doing wrong. Learn to do right. Seek justice. And now comes a very interesting word, defend the oppressed. It can be also translated, correct the oppressor. I don't know which one is easier, defend the oppressed or correct the oppressor. Both is a very challenging task. Take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. Your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves. They all love bribes and chase after gifts. I think since Isaiah, nothing has changed in politics worldwide. They do not defend the cause of the fatherless. The widow's case does not come before them. So Isaiah somehow shares about the situation in which he lives. And Jeremiah, more or less the same. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Reform your ways and your actions, and I will let you live in this place. There's a correlation. Reform your ways and your actions, and I will let you live in this place. Do not trust in deceptive words and say, this is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. If you really change your ways and your actions and deal with each other justly, if you do not oppress the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not follow other gods to your own harm, then I will let you live in this place, and the land I gave your ancestors forever and ever. So verse 5 and verse 7, they belong together. If you really change your ways and your actions, then I will let you live in this place. So if you do not live like that, and if you don't change your ways and your actions, if you don't take care of the foreigners, the fatherless, and the widow, then it means you will no longer live in this place. And this is why Israel was sent into exile. And that shows how strong God is on this point of caring for the fatherless, for the widows, and for the foreigners, and for the orphans. We continue our walk through God's word. The prophet Micah says, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. We all know this verse, we love it. And it's very strong on the issue of justice. When we read then into the New Testament, when we read the gospel stories, it is clear that the life of Christ was one that exemplified compassion for orphans, widows, and the poor, as mentioned in the first and the Old Testament. One can say that Christ fulfilled them with perfection because he loved them. Remember what I just shared from the Psalm. When Jesus started his first sermon, according to Luke, it says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of the sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down, and the eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, "Today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Good news to the poor. Proclaim the freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free. This is, well, Jesus says, now this has begun. This is started today with him opening his ministry. So this is important to him. It is important to him that poor people will hear the good news. It is important to him that prisoners will be set free. It is important to him that those blind people will be able to see again, and that the oppressed people will become free. And if this is important to Christ, it should be important to Christ followers as well. And then, of course, you all know Matthew 25, I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. A walk through God's word. We have to add Acts, the book of Acts, right after Pentecost. We just celebrated Pentecost. It is said about the newly formed congregation in Jerusalem. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. So they saw that there were people who were in need, and they took it upon themselves to share and to care for them. Anyone who had need would be able to receive something. That is mentioned again also in chapter 4. All the believers were one in heart and mind. Imagine a church where we all are one in heart and mind. Or maybe let's start with the congregation. It's a smaller body. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and God's grace was so powerfully at work in them all that there were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. Those who are in need, they were helped by the church. And I believe that is one of the reasons why the church grew so magnificently in the beginning, because they took care of those who were in need. They valued the position of the woman, and that was so attractive to so many people that the church was just every Sunday very full with new people. Acts chapter 6 brings everything then in kind of a system about the daily distribution of food, because anybody who had need was cared for. The choosing of the 7 deacons was for the purpose of ensuring that the widows of the Hellenistic Jews were specifically considered in the sharing of the food. So there's now a position. There were the apostles, and they added the deacons, whose task was to specifically care for those who were in need of care. And the distribution of food on a daily basis was one way to care for those poor people. Then Paul's letters. We come close to an end now. In 1 Corinthians, at the end, Paul says now about the collection for the Lord's people. Do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up, so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Then when I arrive, I will give letters of introduction to the men you approve and send them with your gift to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was a congregation at that time that was in need of some support. It was a fairly poor congregation, apparently. And so Paul organized kind of a collection, a Sunday collection for those people in Jerusalem. And then they organized people to send the money with them. And so here comes the issue of Sunday collections, which we do up to today. And with our collection, we support worthy causes and people in need all over the world. It comes from this one. Galatians chapter 2, it says, all they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor. the very thing I had been eager to do all along. Paul and Peter, they had kind of conflict, theological conflict. And then they had a big discussion in Jerusalem. And at the end of the discussion, they somehow agreed to disagree. And they said, okay, you go this way and we go this way. And the sole agreement they really reached was, we have to remember the poor. It doesn't matter which direction we go, but we have to remember the poor. In Timothy, Paul says, give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. And finally, in James chapter 1, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So this was kind of a quick rush through some of the verses in the Bible where the issue of foreigners and the poor people and the widows and the orphans is mentioned. We do have many more verses, but that would be too much then at the end. Some people say we have about 600 verses mentioned this issue of poverty and poor people and so on. I haven't counted it, but it is quite a lot. So now we have this title, Imagine a World Made Beautiful by How We Live. And now it comes to us. The biblical evidence is clear that caring for the poor, for the widows, for the orphans and the refugees is not a once-off thing. It is more like a lifestyle, something that should be in our daily thinking. You are the light of the world, Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5. You are the light of the world and the salt of the earth. You are the light now, in this moment, in these days, and not at some stage, under certain conditions, when the time is right. When I'm feeling okay, then I'm a light. Or when I have enough money, then I'm the salt of the earth. When I'm married, or when I'm retired, when I'm doing this and so on, then I am the light. No, Jesus says, you are now the light of this world. And you are the salt of this earth. So if we would really be light and world, we would have something to say in this world. Caring and sharing is part of our Christian DNA. That is very clear. And by following God's commands, we contribute to the betterment of our world. That's for sure. Knowing that we are on a journey to our heavenly home, where these earthly things don't matter anymore. We are all on a journey. We have a certain day when we will exit this life here. And until that time, we are here to follow Christ. We are here to care and to share, to see with God's eyes the people around us. A friend of mine just sent me the other day a quote from Michael Frost. I haven't seen that before, but it suits very much to our discussion here tonight. A lot of Christians use the term justice when they're really just talking about charity. Let's be clear about our terminology. Justice is about fixing the whole system to ensure access for all to both tools and opportunities. And there comes a guide to that one. We live in a world of inequality. On the left top picture, the inequality, we know of that everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in the UK, it's in Germany, it's in South Africa, it's in Malawi, it's everywhere. We do have some people who have access to everything. They get all the apples, and somehow the tree is falling down to the one side, and it's easy to get all the fruits. And the other one is just standing there and wants to get the tree from the apple, or the apple from the tree, and but he can't reach it. So then we speak, we need to have equal tools. Equality is something very important. But if you both give them the same ladder, the situation hasn't changed much. So if you give an elephant and a monkey and a bird the same task of flying through the world, it's only the bird who is able to fly and not the elephant. Well, I haven't seen a flying elephant, but well. So they might have the same equal task, but they don't have the same possibilities to reach that. So then people speak of equity. That means we have to adjust the ladder of the other person who can't reach the fruits in the tree. This is the picture below here. Now we still have this system which is somehow not working well. And it's shown in this picture by the distribution of the fruits. On the left side of the tree, you can see quite a lot of fruit, and on the right side, just 1, 2, 3 fruit. And equity is fine, but if the system, if the resources, and if the whole situation is not supporting this whole situation, equity is not really helpful. It's a good thing, but it's not the best solution. So if it comes to justice, this is then fixing the system to offer equal access to both tools and opportunities. So that means we have to change the system in such a way that both have the same possibility to reach all the fruit. And this shows that to work for justice is something very, very difficult and hard work. And it's not just a thing of a minute or two. We just fix it, not like tomorrow. It is something which goes deep into the roots. It goes deep into the roots of society. It goes deep into the roots of our own approach, of our own understanding. And because it is much easier to say, oh no, everybody has to get the same ladder, and then we can reach the fruits. But justice shows that the situation is not solved by that, or the crisis. So imagine a world made beautiful by how we live. Seeing the vast poverty and injustice in our world, this task of being a light can be quite daunting and overwhelming. Because we say, well, I'm just a single person and I'm just a small person, what can I do? Remember that it is not our task to save the world. Someone else has done that already. We are only Christ's ambassadors, not more, but also not less. And we are to live according to God's will for us and for this world. We are preaching more through our deeds than our words, step by step and day by day. We are advocates. Speak up, we heard from earlier. Speak up. We are advocates and we are God's messengers, bringing hope and good news to the destitute and lost, and the source of our light, because she said, you are the light. The source of our light is not our strength, but it's God himself. So we are more like a mirror of what God has done to us, and this is what we are sharing. Let me finish with a story. Maybe you know that. A man was walking, let me just adjust my screen a little bit. A man was walking along a deserted beach at sunset. As he walked, he could see a young boy in the distance. As he drew nearer, he noticed that the boy kept bending down, picking something up and throwing it into the water. Time and again, he kept hurling things into the ocean. As the man approached even closer, he was able to see that the boy was picking up starfish that had been washed up on the beach, and one at a time, he was throwing them back into the water. The man asked the boy what he was doing, and the boy replied, I am saving starfish that are stranded, replied the boy. If they stay on the beach, they will dry out and they will die. So I am putting them back into the ocean so they can live. But, said the man, you can't possibly save them all. There are thousands on this beach, and this must be happening on hundreds of beaches along the coast. You can't possibly make a difference. The boy looked down, frowning for a moment, then bent down to pick up another starfish, smiling as he threw it back into the sea. And the boy replied, it makes a huge difference to that one. And he continued with his work. So God bless you while you save one starfish after the other.